Hey everybody, we're back in the shanty already. Remember the last time I was in the shanty, or it might have been Santa Claus that was in the shanty the last time. I told you that I wouldn't see you until next year, or he told you he wouldn't see you until next year. I'm pretty sure it was Santa Claus because it still smells like reindeer in here. Or it could be the cigar I just put out, I'm not sure which. But anyway, it's not the new year yet. And here I haven't even had a chance to take down my Christmas decorations. And here we are. Why? Well, I told you at that time that we would come back if anything new happened that we needed you to know about, and a couple of new things have happened. The first thing I want to do is update you on where we are with the CMS mandate and the OSHA ETS mandate in the courts, because the Supreme Court has done a couple of things. The second thing I want to do is talk to you a little bit about the CDC changing the isolation and the quarantine guidance, and we'll do that second. So let's hit the courts first. Remember, I told you, I think, that when the Sixth Circuit lifted the Fifth Circuit stay on the OSHA ETS, that a bunch of people ran to the Supreme Court and filed emergency petitions to get the court to hear whether or not the stay should be put back in place. Justice Kavanaugh, who got the matter because he handles the Sixth Circuit, gave the government until December 30th to file briefs on why the stay should remain lifted. And so that was the date we were working with, that December 30th date. In the meantime, on December 22nd, the court fast-tracked both of these challenges and said that they would actually hear oral arguments on the OSHA vaccine or test mandate for large employers and the CMS mandate for healthcare workers on Friday, January 7th, 2022. And until January 7th, all the lower court rulings remain in place. And by lower court rulings, we mean the Sixth Circuit lifting of the stay is in place. So we're working toward that January 10th first deadline under the ETS. And with respect to the CMS, half the states are covered by an injunction, roughly. The other half the states are not covered by an injunction, roughly. So we have a decision to make there, right? So what the court's going to do is they're going to hear oral argument on the 7th on both of these cases, and they will determine whether or not the government should be able to enforce these rules while litigation is still pending on both of these rules. Okay, that's all they're dealing with. What they're dealing with here is the issue of the various stays and injunctions. That's it. Should the ETS mandate be stayed or not? Should we put the Fifth Circuit stay back in place or leave the Sixth Circuit decision lifting the stay in place? Should the CMS mandate be stayed, enjoined in all the states or not enjoined in all the states? Those are the issues that the court is going to decide. They are not going to decide the legality of the OSHA order or the CMS order, although what they do decide will likely give us a hint of which way they're going. All right, now, don't forget, the Supreme Court has been pretty vaccine friendly so far. Remember, they allowed a hospital in Texas to have a vaccine mandate. That's a private employer, not the government. They allowed Indiana University, not Indiana State University, to have a vaccine mandate. Now, that's a government employer, but it's a state government employer, not the federal government employer. And they allowed New York to require healthcare workers to be vaccinated, even if they had a religious objection. But again, remember, that's local government, state, city, local government, not the federal government. These two, this issue with the CMS mandate and the ETS deal with the federal government's power, which is a different issue. So that's the first thing that's going on. What's the next thing that's going on? So, by the way, what does that mean for us? Well, what that means for us, remember, the court's not going to hear the oral argument until the 7th. The first deadline under the ETS is January 10th. That's when you have to have your policy and know all your vaccine status and have your roster and have all that. You might want to continue to work toward doing that because we're not going to get a decision from the court before that January 10th date in all likelihood. Hopefully that means we will have a decision from the Supreme Court before the second deadline, the February 9th deadline, which is the really important deadline, because that's when people either have to be vaccinated or they have to start doing weekly testing. So that's what that means. All right, now let's go over to the CDC. So what did the CDC do that's of importance to us? Well, they changed the isolation timeframes and the quarantine timeframes. On Monday, December 27th, just yesterday, they issued a press release changing the isolation rules and the quarantine rules. And here's what they said. I'm going to read them to you. They're really short. If you test positive for COVID-19, that means you have to isolate. If you test positive for COVID-19 and have to isolate, everyone, regardless of vaccination status, must do the following. You have to stay home for 5 days. They want you to isolate for 5 days. If after that 5 days you have no symptoms or your symptoms are getting better, the CDC puts it as resolving, you can leave your house. But you must wear a mask when you're around others for an additional 5 days. You have a fever, to continue to stay home until your fever resolves. So that's the isolation rules. What about the quarantine rules? Remember, you get quarantined. You isolate if you have the disease. You get quarantined if you've been in contact with somebody who had the disease, close contact with somebody who had the disease. The rules here differ depending on whether you're boosted, whether you're vaccinated, how long it's been since you've vaccinated, or if you're not vaccinated. So again, I'm going to read these to you. If you have been boosted, or if you have completed the primary series of Pfizer or Moderna vaccines within the last 6 months. So it's been less than 6 months since you've had your second shot of Pfizer or Moderna, or you've completed your J&J vaccine within the last 2 months. So it's been 2 months since your J&J. You do not have to quarantine, but the CDC wants you to wear a mask around others for 10 days. And on day 5, if it's at all possible, take a test, get a test. If you develop symptoms at any point during that time, get a test and stay home. And then you're out of quarantine and you isolate, right? All right, so that's if you've been boosted, completed the primary Pfizer or J&J within the last 6 months, if you've been boosted, completed the primary Pfizer or Moderna within the last 6 months, or completed the primary J&J within the last 2 months. You don't have to quarantine. If, on the other hand, none of those things are true, if you've completed the primary series of Pfizer or Moderna over 6 months ago, it's been longer than 6 months since your second shot, or you completed the J&J over 2 months ago, it's been longer since you've had your J&J, and if you're not boosted, or if you're unvaccinated, now you have to stay home for 5 days, and after that, continue to wear a mask around others for an additional 5 days. So we're treating you, if you're unvaccinated or not boosted, we're treating you as if you are testing positive. We're quarantining you for 5 days. And then you have to continue to wear a mask around others for an additional 5 days. Now, the rules say if you can't quarantine, you must wear a mask for 10 days. But I'm not sure why you wouldn't be able to quarantine. But if you can, and test on day 5 if possible in either of those circumstances. And if at any point, again, if you have symptoms, you have to stay home and get a test. Now, why is that important? That's important because the isolation and quarantine issue comes up in the ETS in your policy. But it's also important for us here in Michigan for another reason. We have a statute. The statute is MCL 419401 at SEC, or as we referred to it when it came out, Public Act 238 of 2020, the COVID-19 Employment Rights Act. And remember, that's the statute in Michigan that tells employees and employers when employees and employers have to stay home if they've been exposed to COVID or if they have COVID, and when they're protected. And that statute refers to the CDC's definition of isolate and guidance. So if you've got employees who have been in close contact with people who've had COVID and they're not vaccinated, the rule just changed. If you have people who test positive for COVID, the rule just changed. They don't have to stay home as long as they used to. So keep that in mind. That's why we came back. I wish you all a very, very happy New Year. I'll see you. I hope I don't see you for another couple of weeks. Happy New Year, everybody. Hey, everybody, wait. Don't leave yet. We have breaking news shanty update. And you can tell this is a breaking news Shanty update because it's now Wednesday morning, and I'm wearing a different sweater than I was yesterday. And that's because this morning when I got up, our colleague Jeff Siegel, who is in the healthcare practice group and keeps an eye on this stuff, sent me an email letting me know that CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which I probably just got backwards, I'm not sure, has issued an updated FAQ. And CMS says in that updated FAQ that they will begin monitoring and enforcing compliance with the CMS vaccine mandate. We're talking about the CMS vaccine mandate here in the states not subject to the injunction. Those include Michigan. Michigan is not subject to the injunction. So CMS is going to begin monitoring and enforcing compliance in those states, including Michigan, on the following modified timeline. The deadline for phase 1 is January 27, 2022, and the deadline for phase 2 is February 28, 2022. So if you are covered by the CMS mandate, keep those dates in mind. But remember, the Supreme Court is still going to hear the CMS case and have oral argument, as we discussed earlier in the Shanty. Happy New Year again. See y'all next time.